Harry absolutely desperate. I thought that Meredith Maines, who is a very aggressive...
The keyboard warriors who defend her and who are now attacking me as I speak, and you for writing that book.
Is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
Right.
The Netflix series is over. There's no great...
Tom Bauer just dropped something massive, and it's not what you think. The royal romance everyone thought was a fairy tale turns out it was more like a script. And here's the wild part. When he tried to write this book, people who worked with Meghan suddenly went quiet on him. We're talking about a veteran author on his 26th book who knows exactly when something's off. So what's really going on here? Because what he found changes everything you thought you knew about this situation. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button and smash the like, because what's coming next is going to change how you see everything. We're talking Diana comparisons, Hollywood strategies, and contradictions you won't believe. Trust me, you'll want notifications on for this one. Now let's dive in. Here's the thing about Meghan and Diana. It wasn't just admiration. Bauer found this went way deeper than that. She didn't just respect Princess Diana or feel inspired by her. She studied her, every single move. The way Diana tilted her head during interviews, those soft glances at the camera.
So he's a very complicated, depressed, unintelligent man who is seeking a role.
Even the specific outfits she wore to certain events. Meghan was taking notes like she was preparing for the role of a lifetime. And in a way, she was. Get this. Bauer talks about how she'd recreate Diana's most iconic looks, mirror her body language, even copy those tearful, vulnerable displays that made Diana so beloved. It's like she had a playbook and was running the same exact plays, hoping for the same reaction from the public. She thought if she could replicate Diana perfectly, she'd win over the world's affection the same way. Every pose for the cameras, every precisely timed sigh, every emotional beat seemed designed to echo Diana's most memorable appearances.
Relationships with so many people. So I'm convinced she has a very talented staff, they're hard work.
The problem? You can't fake authenticity. Diana had this natural warmth that just radiated when she walked into a room. People felt seen by her. It was effortless. She didn't have to think about how to connect with people. It just happened. That's what made her so special and why the world loved her so much. But with Meghan, people started noticing the cracks. Those smiles seemed a little too practiced, like they'd been perfected in front of a mirror. The vulnerability felt staged instead of spontaneous, more act than honest feeling. Those dramatic sighs that were supposed to pull at heartstrings, they made people roll their eyes instead. The public's pretty good at spotting when someone's putting on a show versus when they're being authentic. And the skepticism started pretty quick. You can't just copy someone's mannerisms and expect to capture their magic.
She's a very determined woman, and she thought she could cut me off, and she failed.
It's friends and family noticed the transformation.
It doesn't work like that. Bauer doesn't sugarcoat it. Meghan wasn't channeling Diana. She was doing a bad imitation that everyone could see right through. And listen, the audience always notices when honest emotion gets swapped out for scripted lines. Always. The cameras were rolling, the stage was set, but instead of buying into it, people saw exactly what was happening. They saw someone trying to wear another person's humanity like it was a costume you could just put on. What made it worse was Harry. Instead of protecting his mother's memory, he was right there enabling the whole thing. He let Diana's legacy become part of this structured image, turning her story into what looked like a prop in someone else's game. The very legacy he adored and wanted to protect became a tool for building a public presence. Think about that for a second. Instead of being the shield for his mother's memory, Harry became an enabler, letting it all happen right in front of him. Bauer's blunt about this.
Again, suggesting Prince Harry could somehow worm his way back into the fold. It seems like Sussex PR is in overdrive lately.
Meghan came across like a discount version of Diana, and Harry, He'd become a pawn in someone else's production. The world was watching, and they could tell the difference between the original and an imitation. Diana's magic was who she was naturally. Meghan's version was practiced, planned, and transparent. And that's where the whole thing started falling apart. Because once people see through the act, there's no going back. Before Harry came into the picture, Meghan was grinding away in Hollywood as a minor TV actress. And Bauer makes it clear this had little to do with acting talent. Not really. It was about positioning herself with the right people at the right time. She understood something that a lot of aspiring actors miss. Talent only gets you so far in Hollywood.
Behind the polished Netflix smiles and carefully crafted speeches, there's another story, one that smells of
The real currency is who you know and how well you can work those relationships. Listen, she didn't wait around for her big break to magically happen. Every party she attended, every luxury event, every exclusive gathering, these were purposeful moves, not just fun nights out. Bauer reveals that Meghan was building a network, not a resume. Each handshake mattered. Every smile in front of a camera was intentional. Every introduction to someone influential was another step up the ladder. She was learning how the powerful operate, how they move, how they think. And here's where it gets interesting. Bauer confirms Meghan had a plan from way back. She didn't stumble into fame by accident or luck. She was pursuing it with laser focus. She'd been eyeing opportunities from afar.
Treachery. And that's why, of course, the book was called Revenge, my book, because this is the worst sort of revenge.
Looking for paths that could take her from supporting roles to international recognition. Hollywood relationships were the foundation, but she knew they'd only take her so far. She needed something bigger. Get this, when she was just a young girl, she told her father straight up, "I just want to be famous on the red carpet." That's not a kid dreaming about being an artist or telling stories through acting. That's someone who knew exactly what they wanted: recognition, being seen, standing in that spotlight. And she went after it with everything she had. Charm by charm, appearance by appearance, one deliberate move at a time. Then Harry showed up. And listen, this wasn't fate or destiny or some romantic chance encounter. This was the jackpot. Everything Meghan had been working towards suddenly came together in one relationship. Wealth? Check. Global attention? Absolutely. International status? Without question.
The little girl was seen in a public setting, dressed in an almost eerily curated outfit, a blue and white.
A royal title? That was the cherry on top. For someone as ambitious as Meghan, this was the ultimate prize wrapped up in one person. Bauer's research shows she'd done her homework long before they met. She understood what marrying into royalty could mean for her brand, her influence, her global reach. This was the golden ticket she'd been positioning herself for through years of climbing Hollywood's social ladder. All those skills she'd developed in working rooms and charming influential people, it all led to this moment. The methodical nature of it all is what stands out. Some people might call it ruthless, others might say it's genius. But either way, it's why so many now question the innocent girl meets prince narrative we were all sold. This wasn't a fairy tale romance where two people accidentally fell in love. This was planning, ambition, and years of preparation, all coming together in one perfect opportunity. And Meghan wasn't about to let it slip away.
Meghan swore to protect their children, is now the very thing tearing their image apart.
She'd spent too long climbing that ladder to miss the chance when it finally appeared right in front of her. One interview, Meghan barely knew who Harry was before they met. The next interview, she's describing how she'd memorized his entire life. So which is it? Was she this naive girl who stumbled into a royal romance? Or did she know exactly who he was and what he represented long before that first date? The public can't reconcile these two completely different versions, and honestly, neither can the media. Bauer calls this the contradiction game, and it's impossible to ignore once you start paying attention. Every appearance, every documentary, every photo that comes out seems precisely orchestrated to serve whatever story they're pushing at that particular moment. Want raw, authentic emotion? Forget it. What we get instead are scripted tears, measured pauses.
It's hinted at. Somewhere between Los Angeles and London, the years didn't add up. And when Meghan's own father, Thomas Markle,
and directed emotional beats that scream rehearsed rather than spontaneous. Even things that should feel sweet and genuine, like family photos or public appearances, feel manipulated to keep the spotlight squarely on Meghan. And Harry's role in all this, he's become the perfect supporting actor. Bauer points out how he just nods along, repeats the lines, mirrors whatever Meghan feeds him. It's like watching someone who used to have his own voice suddenly become a walking teleprompter. Friends and people who knew him before the marriage noticed the transformation almost immediately. The Harry they remembered was direct, charismatic, genuinely funny. He could command a room with natural charm and sincerity. Now he's cautious, subdued, almost robotic in how he presents himself.
From her early years through to her rift, people from contacting you? Do you believe that happened?
Oh, I know it happened. I mean,
The man who left the army with dignity, who could make people laugh and feel comfortable around him, has faded into the background. He confirms things, he nods, he mirrors. But he rarely leads anymore. He's following constantly, a step behind, looking to Meghan to see what the right response should be. Let's not ignore the timing of everything either. Social media posts, announcements, photo opportunities that feel staged, they all seem designed to distract from something else, dominate the headlines, or steer the conversation in a specific direction. It's tiring to watch and, frankly, tiring to believe. What was sold to us as transparency and honesty is actually just a relentless spin cycle that never stops turning.
Anybody who has denounced him, who has fed the press, all I know is when I wrote my book, which is very revelatory.
Bauer's calling it the contradiction game because it's been ongoing for years now. And here's the thing. The audience isn't applauding anymore. They're rolling their eyes. People are tired of trying to keep track of which version of events is supposed to be the true one this week. They're comparing notes, noticing the gaps between what's said and what's shown, seeing the difference between claimed innocence and obvious planning. The tragedy is, Harry seems completely trapped in this. Not because anyone's physically holding him back, but because the bridges he burned along the way make retreat impossible. Public statements about the royal family, repeated media appearances, disputes that played out in front of the world, all of it locks him into a story that might not even be entirely his own. The prince who once inspired admiration through charity work and military service,
about Meghan and Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet, were they really royal heirs? Why did the palace stay quiet?
has become a prop in someone else's drama. And Bauer doesn't sugarcoat any of it. Harry's loss of independence is complete. He's no longer the prince with his own voice. He's the man who nods while Meghan performs. Listen, getting people to talk for this book was nearly impossible. Bauer's a veteran at this. We're talking about his 26th book. He knows when doors are being closed on him, and he knows the difference between someone being busy versus someone actively avoiding his calls. And with Meghan's situation, it was ridiculous how difficult it became to reach folks who'd actually worked with her, who knew her personally, who could share the good parts of her journey. He interviewed around 80 sources for this project. But here's the wild part. Hearing anything positive was like pulling teeth. The folks who could have balanced things out, who might have shared her better qualities or defended her choices,
That the whispers had actually begun weeks before Meghan Markle's birthday. But the noise had reached a fever pitch the moment she posted her.
They mysteriously went quiet. Bowers convinced someone was working behind the scenes to manage who talked and who didn't. And honestly, when you've written as many books as he has, you develop a sense for when information's being blocked versus when individuals genuinely have nothing to say. Get this, Meghan's known for cutting others off completely when things go south. It's not a gradual fade or a natural drift apart. It's a full shutdown. She ghosts them when she doesn't need them anymore, or when they don't fit into whatever plan she's executing at the time. Friends from before the royal marriage, colleagues from her acting days, those who helped her climb the ladder. Once their usefulness expired, they were out. No explanation, no gradual distance, just gone. Even her dad, Thomas Markle, couldn't escape this treatment. And here's what makes it particularly sad. He still loves his daughter. He told Bowers straight up that no matter what she's done to him, no matter how she's treated him,
evidence was undeniable. When Harry tried threatening legal action to force the BBC to retract the story, the palace still refused. They told the BBC, do not...
His love hasn't changed. Can you imagine your own child cutting you out of their life and you're sitting there telling a biographer that your feelings remain the same? Thomas is getting older now, doesn't think he has much time left. And he's truly puzzled about why things turned out this way. Bowers spent time with him and got details nobody else had heard before. Thomas opened up about Meghan's childhood, her relationship with her mother, the truth about her first marriage, information that adds crucial context to understanding who she became. This was the first time Thomas really unburdened himself to anyone about all of it. He's hurt, confused, and can't quite understand why his daughter has become so distant. Bowers suggests it's because she was embarrassed by him, didn't like his appearance, thought he didn't...
Not as Harry's equal, but as his handler, feeding him lines, shaping interviews, turning a once respected soldier into her personal echo chamber.
Fit the image she was trying to project. That's cold when you think about it. Your father, the man who raised you, becomes an inconvenience because he doesn't photograph well enough for your new lifestyle. But this is the pattern Bauer keeps finding. Meghan manages information, manages access, and when someone stops being useful or starts becoming a liability to her image, they're cut loose. No second chances, no room for complicated family dynamics, just a clean break and moving forward like they never existed. Thomas telling his side gave Bauer pieces of the puzzle that help explain how Meghan operates. It's not just about ambition or wanting success. It's about maintaining tight grip on everything. The narrative, access to details, who gets to speak about her and what they're allowed to say. And when someone like Bauer comes along who won't play by those rules, who'll dig deeper and talk to those she'd rather stayed silent, that's when the real picture starts coming out.
Weeks had been absolutely turgid and torrid for her. She had been dubbed Duchess Difficult again.
Hollywood isn't forgiving, and Bauer lays this out pretty clearly. Meghan's empire of influence hit a wall fast. Those Netflix deals everyone hyped up as groundbreaking, they felt more like extended therapy sessions than actual entertainment. The series that were supposed to showcase their lives and perspectives came across as self-focused rather than engaging. People tuned in expecting something fresh and compelling, but what they got didn't land the way it was supposed to. Spotify partnerships didn't work out either. Lifestyle ventures that were launched with big announcements went nowhere. The aura of unstoppable glamour that surrounded Meghan in those early days started showing cracks. What was supposed to be this seamless transition from royalty to global media power turned into a lesson in overexposure and poor execution.
Hi, congratulations. Thanks for taking the time out. I know you guys must be really, really busy, but
ambition without proper follow-through proves ruinous. And that's exactly what happened here. Bauer explains that Meghan's meticulously built image became complicated to work with. Those coordinated appearances and tightly supervised messaging couldn't hide the inconsistencies anymore. Producers, celebrities, and industry insiders started keeping their distance. And here's the thing. It wasn't because opportunities weren't there. It was because working with her had become unpredictable. Everything associated with her seemed to attract controversy, mixed messages, and negative press cycles. Even Hollywood's tolerance for drama has its limits. The charm and celebrity appeal that worked at luxury events and red carpet moments couldn't translate into sustained influence or lasting partnerships. You need more than ambition to maintain loyalty, investment, and respect in that industry. Bauer's research shows that
and so impossible to dodge that it sent shockwaves from Buckingham Palace all the way to Montecito. Tom Bauer did
Meghan's approach of trying to leverage royal fame and titles for credibility backfired spectacularly. The two worlds don't mix as easily as she thought they would. The vision she'd had, media dominance, creative authority, A-list relevance, collapsed under its own weight. Every failed project, every deal that didn't materialize, every contradictory public statement chipped away at whatever credibility remained. What started as excitement and possibility turned into desperation. The impression of success became overexposed and, frankly, exhausting to watch. People got tired of the constant announcements that led nowhere, the big promises that fell flat. Hollywood thrives on both talent and trustworthiness.
Then, the people she trusted, the people she confided in, the people who saw the version of her that existed before the spot.
You can get away with being difficult if you're exceptionally talented, or you can be moderately talented if you're reliable and easy to work with. But if you're neither, the industry moves on quickly. And that's what Bauer documents. An industry that saw a figure riddled with inconsistencies, overcalculation, and relentless self-promotion, and decided the risk wasn't worth it. Here's what really stands out in Bauer's analysis. The intentional networking that got Meghan to Harry, that whole deliberately constructed climb up the ladder, it worked brilliantly for landing royalty. But those same tactics didn't translate to building a sustainable media presence. The skills that helped her navigate parties and charm her way into influential circles weren't enough to create content people actually wanted to consume or projects that resonated with audiences. The planning was visible, and audiences can always tell when something feels manufactured rather than authentic. The result was a string of underwhelming launches.
Into that. Somewhere between Los Angeles and London, the years didn't add up. And when Meghan's own father, Thomas Markle's
partnerships that fizzled out, and an industry that gradually lost interest in taking chances on someone whose reputation had become more trouble than it was worth. The Queen's Jubilee celebrations in 2022 became a turning point. Meghan and Harry thought they'd have a prominent role in the festivities. After all, they were still technically part of the family, still had their titles, still had name recognition that could have added to the spectacle. But Charles and William had different ideas. They set very clear boundaries on what level of involvement would actually be allowed. Limited access to the Queen herself, no major spotlight appearances. And the big one, no balcony moment with the rest of the working members during that iconic finale. That balcony appearance is everything during these celebrations.
Harry's outrageous entry to the St. George's Chapel just when the Cambridges were doing this.
It's the money shot, the image that gets replayed around the world, the visual representation of unity and continuity. Being excluded from it wasn't just a scheduling conflict. It was a statement. Bauer suggests they'd hoped for something very different. They wanted exposure, wanted to be central to the celebrations, wanted that spotlight to shine on them just like old times. The financial implications matter too. Staying relevant in those circles directly impacts their earning potential and media value back in California. If they're seen as outcasts or irrelevant, their connection loses the appeal that makes them interesting to audiences and valuable to potential business partners. But Charles and William had planned the whole thing with precision. Meghan and Harry could attend, sure, but the terms didn't give them what they actually needed.
Bauer. Tom Bauer just explained that behind the magazine covers, the speeches, and the glamorous interviews, there is a completely...
The appearances were brief, the access was limited, and the message was unmistakable. No special treatment or prominent positioning just because they'd made the trip across the Atlantic. They headed back to California feeling pretty disappointed about how everything went down. Bauer uses the term chagrined and annoyed to describe their mood. All that travel, all that effort to be there. And they didn't get the exposure they'd hoped for, especially meaningful time with the Queen. The whole experience must have felt like a reality check about where they actually stood now. That's when reality really started to sink in. Charles and William weren't going to be pushed around or manipulated into giving them prominence they no longer earned through actual duties. A line had been drawn and nobody was budging. For once, there was firm positioning instead of trying to accommodate or compromise. It was a united front that left no room for negotiation. Think about what that means for their position moving forward.
Peeled back the layers of palace life, but nothing he's uncovered compares to what he found about Doria Ragland, Meghan Markle.
They'd left claiming to want privacy and independence, but then they kept trying to maintain relevance and access when it suited them. The Jubilee made it crystal clear that you can't have it both ways. You can't step back from responsibilities, but expect to maintain all the privileges and spotlight moments. Bauer sees this as the moment they finally got the message. The fantasy of being rebels who could pick and choose which parts of life to participate in while rejecting the obligations. It wasn't going to work. The institution had moved on. The structure had adjusted. And Harry and Meghan were now definitively on the outside looking in, regardless of what titles they still technically held. The Jubilee wasn't just a failed photo opportunity. It was confirmation that the bridge back to full inclusion had been permanently burned, and there was no rebuilding it.
On a hovel. That's their problem. They're stuck now. But, the truth is about them. Then he wore a Nazi uniform.
Regardless of how many times they showed up for major events. Here's where it gets wild. They left claiming they wanted seclusion for their children. That was literally one of the main reasons given for stepping back from duties and moving to California. Protect the kids from media intrusion, give them a normal life away from cameras, shield them from the same treatment that Harry felt damaged him growing up. Made sense, right? People understood that motivation, even if they disagreed with how Harry and Meghan went about everything else. But then came these perfectly timed public statements about Archie and Lilibet. Every major milestone, every update, every photo release seemed planned for maximum attention. The timing always coincided with other big news or events, almost like these reveals were designed to redirect headlines back to them.
I think Meghan sees enemies everywhere, as he did too.
My father was ultimately responsible for both me and my brother.
Bauer points out that these weren't casual family updates shared quietly. They were coordinated moments with professional photography and scheduled releases. Get this, the images often focused more on Meghan and Harry than on the little ones themselves. The kids became part of the visual composition rather than the main subject. It's subtle, but when you look at how these shots are framed and released, you notice the parents are positioned prominently, while their son and daughter serve more as props in the overall image. That's a far cry from the seclusion they claimed to be seeking. Every release, every statement, every planned reveal seemed designed for consumption rather than genuine family moments kept out of the spotlight. They said they wanted to escape the cameras, but they kept creating opportunities for the cameras on their own terms. The difference is influence. They didn't want tabloids and paparazzi dictating the narrative.
This isn't the first time she has recreated some of Diana's most iconic looks.
But they absolutely wanted to direct when and how their family appeared in headlines. And Harry went along with all of it. That's what makes it particularly ironic. This is the same guy who spoke passionately about the trauma of growing up in the public eye, who blamed outside attention for his mother's struggles, who said he wanted to break the cycle for his own son and daughter. Yet here he was, participating in precisely orchestrated moments involving his kids. The very exposure he claimed to be fleeing from, he was creating himself under different circumstances. Bauer's take here is pretty damning. When you strip away the justifications and explanations, what you're left with is a contradiction that's impossible to ignore. Seclusion when it's inconvenient, visibility when it's advantageous. That's not protecting your family, that's directing their image.
Tom Bauer reveals a picture far darker than anyone expected. He doesn't describe a prince who simply experimented with drugs as a teenager.
There's a huge difference between those two things. Think about the long-term implications of this approach. These kids are growing up with parents who say one thing about staying out of the spotlight, but do another thing entirely. The talk about titles, the timed photo drops, the scheduled statements. It all keeps Archie and Lilibet in the conversation, despite the stated desire to keep them out of it. You can't claim to want seclusion while simultaneously using your family as part of your approach. What really stands out in Bauer's analysis is how this contradicts everything they said about leaving. The whole departure was framed around protecting their family and living authentically away from scrutiny. But the pattern suggests something different. A desire to direct the narrative rather than escape it entirely. They didn't want to stop being figures in the headlines. They wanted to be in those headlines on their own terms without institutional oversight or
acknowledgments of a truth she spent decades denying. Bauer claims one recording captures Meghan discussing
traditional obligations. This contradiction isn't just hypocritical, it undermines their entire justification for leaving. If seclusion was genuinely the priority, there'd be no scheduled statements, no timed releases, no updates about their son and daughter. The fact that these things keep happening reveals what this was really about. Directing their image, not protection of their family's life away from cameras. So here's where we're at now. Tom Bauer's final assessment isn't pretty. The meticulously constructed persona that Meghan spent years building is falling apart. The public's patience has run out. People are exhausted from trying to keep up with the contradictions, tired of the constant spin, and frankly done with the whole performance. What was sold as this revolutionary approach to being modern figures in the spotlight has been exposed as something far more planned and far less authentic. The deals aren't landing anymore. Hollywood's made its decision and it's choosing to keep its distance.
At some point, if it's offered up, it might happen. That is why she's constantly meeting new billionaires.
They want to hide their secrets.
The industry that once seemed excited about what Meghan and Harry could bring to the table has backed away. Every failed project, every partnership that fizzled out, every inconsistent statement chipped away at whatever credibility they had left. The excitement and possibility that surrounded them when they first stepped back has turned into skepticism and disinterest. What Bauer documents is essentially the collapse of a facade that was constructed on directing how things looked rather than being genuine. The intentional networking that got Meghan to where she wanted to be initially, that worked. But sustaining it required something she couldn't manufacture: authentic connection and consistent follow-through. You can shape a narrative for a while, but eventually people start noticing the gaps between what's said.
The more we focus on each other as people and not what we look like, not what we're wearing, our gender, our hairstyle,
and what's actually happening. And Harry, that's perhaps the saddest part of this whole thing. The guy who used to be so charismatic, so relatable, so genuinely himself has become almost unrecognizable. Friends who knew him before see someone completely different now. The transformation from a prince people genuinely liked into someone who seems like he's just reading from a script. That's not something you can fake your way past. People notice when someone's lost their spark, when they're not speaking with their own voice anymore. Bauer's book essentially shows how ambition without authenticity eventually crumbles. You can plan, network, position yourself perfectly. But if it's all constructed on directing appearances rather than on something real, it falls apart in the end. The audience sees through it.
Diana's Vanity Fair shoot are so deliberate that they come off as vulgar, and it raises real questions about
the industry loses interest. And what you're left with is a gap between the persona you tried to create and the reality everyone can see. The fairy tale narrative that captivated people initially, it's gone. What's replaced it is a story about planning, inconsistency, and consequences, about burning bridges that can't be rebuilt, about trying to have everything both ways and discovering that doesn't actually work. The kingdom they tried to establish in California, separate from tradition, but still trading on titles and connections. It hasn't turned out the way they envisioned. What stands out most in Bauer's analysis is how avoidable all of this was. Different choices, more consistency, less directing of appearances, and more actual substance.
And child, she wasn't talking about scripts or roles. No, ma'am. She was talking about making a name in the British press. Not Hollywood, Britain. She wanted...
Maybe things would have turned out differently. But that's not what happened. And now we're watching the results of years of inconsistencies finally catching up with the persona they worked so hard to shape. If this changed how you see the whole situation, hit that like button and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Are we finally seeing the real story, or is there still more that hasn't come out yet? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started on unpacking what really happened behind the scenes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.